Good morning, everybody, and happy Easter. Why don't you stand with us as we unite our voices to celebrate and sing to the risen Savior. Come, let us worship our King. Come, let us bow at His feet. He has done great things. See what our Savior has done, and see how His love overcomes. He has done great things. He has done great things. Oh, hero of heaven, you conquered the grave. You free every captive and break every chain, oh God. You have done great things. We dance in your freedom, awake and alive. Oh Jesus, our Savior, your name lifted high, oh God. You have done great things. He's been faithful. Let's sing this. You've been faithful through every storm. Be faithful forevermore. You have done great things, and I know you will do it again. For your promise is yes and amen. You will do great things. Yes, God, you'll do great things. The grave, you free every captive, you break every chain, oh God. You have done great things. We dance, you're free, awake and alive. Oh Jesus, our Savior, your name lifted high, oh God. You have done great things. Above it all, and hallelujah, God, unshakable, hallelujah, you have done great things. Let's sing that again, hallelujah. And hallelujah, God, above it all, and hallelujah, God, unshakable, hallelujah, you have done great things. Great things, oh hero of heaven, you conquered the grave, you free every captive, and you break every chain, oh God. You have done great things. We dance, you're free, awake and alive. Oh Jesus, our Savior, your name lifted high, oh God. You have done great. Continue to praise Him for the victory that we have in Jesus. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with His redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew Him, and all my love is to plunge me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. He him, for he is good.
Man, what we get to celebrate this morning is truly incredible. We celebrate the new life that we have because Jesus resurrected from the grave. You know, I'm reminded of this text in Luke chapter 10, where Jesus' followers come to him. He sent them out to kind of do ministry and teach people about him, and they came back and said, Jesus, we're seeing amazing things happen by the power of your name and the power of your spirit. And he said, yeah, you're going to see incredible things. You're going to see things even greater than these things. But when you see these amazing things happen, don't celebrate in those things. Don't rejoice in that. Instead, rejoice that your names are written in heaven. Rejoice that your names are written in heaven. Just think about that for a minute, that our names, we have a ticket in heaven waiting for us because of what Jesus has done for us. And that is our story. That is our testimony. We all share that same story as long as we follow Jesus. And so let's sing of that testimony together this morning. I saw Satan fall like lightning, and I saw darkness run for cover. But the miracle that I just can't get over is my name is registered in heaven. I believe in signs and wonders. I have resurrection power. Still the miracle that I just can't get over is my name is registered in heaven. So my praise belongs to you forever. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify. By Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. Come together, sons and daughters, bought with blood and washed in water. So we sing the praises of the Spirit, Son, and Father. Our God will finish what he started. Our God will finish what he started. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify. By Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, then he's not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. Oh, this is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify. By Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. Oh, I'm alive. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify. By Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. Yeah.
stay standing with me. Stay standing for the public reading of God's Word. This comes from the Gospel of Mark in the 16th chapter, where we read, Saturday evening, when the Sabbath had ended, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome, they went out and purchased burial spices so they could anoint Jesus' body. Very early on Sunday morning, just at sunrise, they went to the tomb. And on the way, they were asking each other, who's going to roll away the stone for us from the entrance? But as they arrived, they looked up. They saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled aside. When they entered the tomb, they saw a young man clothed in white sitting on the right side. The women were shocked. But the angel said, don't be alarmed. You're looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He isn't here. He's risen from the dead. Look, this is where they laid his body. Now, go and tell his disciples, including Peter, that Jesus is going ahead of you to Galilee. That's where you're going to see him, just as he told you before he died. Welcome, my friends, to Easter at Forum. Thank you. You guys can have a seat. So thankful to be with you guys. Man, we just don't take it for granted that on this Resurrection Sunday, this Easter, you chose to come and spend some time with us. We're honored by that. Super thankful. If you're new or visiting with us for the very first time, welcome to Forum. We love Easter here at Forum for a lot of reasons, hopefully, some super obvious reasons, hopefully. But a lot of those for me on just like a deeply personal level. Easter has always been a really unique time for me because, man, I spent a lot of years going the other direction, a life marked by skepticism and unbelief, a life really marked by doubt. And, you know, I was just one of those kids. I would go to church with my folks on Christmas and on Easter, mainly because I love my parents. I grew up in a Christian home, and so that was just kind of like the thing that my family did. And so I'd go back home, and we'd go to Easter, and my mom would always cook this huge meal, and it was always amazing. And if I'm totally honest, that's part of the reason why I went back home to celebrate Easter, was for that meal. So if that's where you are today, you're in good company, because that's where I spent a lot of years of my life. And man, I'll tell you what, those doubts over my life have changed so dramatically. You know, when I was younger, the things that I had doubts and skepticism about were different. And, you know, and a lot of things happened, and we're going to fast forward through a lot of my story to say that, you know, when I came to follow Jesus, that didn't mean that my doubts went away. It means some doubts went away and was replaced by others. And I had a hard time reconciling some of those doubts. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know that it was safe to talk about them. I mean, nobody told me, Brad, don't talk about your doubts, but that's what I felt like. And then, you know, a lot of things happened, and I found myself getting a degree in theology, and you might think, wow, you must have not had any doubts then, but man, I had more doubts, probably more than ever. And you get out of school, get into vocational ministry, been doing this for a little while now. You might think, well, maybe you don't have doubts now. My friends still have doubts about things. Those doubts have changed over time. It's one of the reasons I love Easter, because Easter is for the doubters too. It's not just for the Christians. It's not just for the followers of Jesus. It's for guys like me who don't take a straight path to the things of faith. I have a tendency to wander through the woods to arrive at certain conclusions and ideas. So wherever you are in your life, in your faith, you are welcome here. You can belong here with us at Forum long before you ever believe the things that we believe here at Forum. We just stole that from the playbook of Jesus. He was always inviting people to belong before they ever believed in him. And so if you're here today because you got an invitation, because it's what you're supposed to do, welcome. You're in good company. And how I want to kick off this Easter message is I actually don't take it from me. I want to, just for the next few minutes, look at how doubt surrounds the story of the resurrection. That if this was ever true, it was true of his earliest followers. And so what I want to do is go into the 7 passages of doubt that surround the resurrection. And we're going to start off right where we did a little bit of reading earlier today in Mark chapter 16. Did you see the doubt that surrounded that? Because on Saturday evening, they went to the grocery store to get the necessary supplies to anoint a dead body. And we don't even have to know anything about first century Jewish burial customs to know they were going to do something with those spices. Why would you go to the store if you thought there wasn't going to be a body? That's our first doubt. It just comes right out of the text. Now, I'm going to jump into some of the other gospel narratives just to show you that every single one of these early historians, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, as they record the life and ministry of Jesus when it comes to the resurrection, they're just trying to help us see there's a ton of doubt that surrounded the resurrection. This is the first one. The second one, I'm going to jump into the gospel according to Luke. He says, early on Sunday morning, the women, they went to the tomb taking those spices that they had prepared. You don't get up early on a Sunday morning if you don't think there's a body in that tomb. You sleep in on Sunday morning, you know what I mean? It's the second instance of doubt. It just comes right off the pages of the text. And the third one, they go into the empty tomb. They don't find the body of Jesus, and they don't just start dancing in the moment like, woo, he came back from the dead. They stand there like, what happened? Like, I don't understand. And we hear this from another one of the gospel writers that the reason why they're puzzled is because they think somebody has stolen the body. Like, where is Jesus, y'all? He's not here. Now, as a part of this third doubt, the angel says, hey, don't be afraid. I know you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He's not here. Clearly, he's not here. He's risen from the dead. Don't you remember him telling you that? Come here, look, this is where he was. He's not here anymore. So get out of here. Go quickly. Tell his disciples that he's risen from the dead and that he's going to go ahead of you into Galilee. That's where you're going to see him. Don't come back to this tomb. Go to Galilee like Jesus told you to do. So they rush back from the tomb. They tell the 11 disciples and everybody else what had happened. And I love it. Luke includes these incredible details. I'm going to tell you exactly who it was. It was Mary, Joanna, the other Mary, and some other women. They all were telling the apostles what had happened. This isn't just a single eyewitness. This isn't just two people. This is a small entourage of people saying, we have seen. Nobody is in that tomb. Do you think that the apostles were like, woo, this is amazing? No, it was the opposite. It sounded like nonsense to them. So they didn't believe it. And this makes a lot of sense to me because who has a framework of belief that has resurrection as a part of it? You ever been to a funeral where you thought, hey, might come out of that coffin? Never. If that was even happened once, I'm never going to another funeral again because that's super weird and terrifying. They don't believe it. Now, what do you think Peter's going to do? He's like, oh, he runs to the tomb. And I can imagine Mary and the other Mary and probably a couple other Marys were like, Peter, stop. Ain't nobody there. He told us to go to Galilee. Peter's like, la, 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 I'm going to go see for myself. Now, this is just like me. If my wife or my kids are like, Dad, I can't find this thing. I'm like, did you look in the place that it's supposed to be? Yes. I'm like, no, you didn't. And I go look. I'm like, it's right here. Right? This is all Peter's doing. I'm going to go look for myself because sometimes you get confused, Mary. You know what I mean? So he peers in. He sees the burial rags, the linen wrappings. Does Peter go to Galilee? No, Peter goes home. Well, I guess we'll just head back home. I don't understand what's going on. Okay, there is so much doubt that surrounds the resurrection. Easter, it's for the doubters too. And the sixth one. Now, Jesus starts showing up all over the place. And in one of these instances, and we're going to jump into Mark here really quickly because he does an abbreviated version. Luke gives the expanded version. So if you want to read about the story of these two guys walking to a town about 7 miles outside of Jerusalem known as Emmaus. Now you got to think, everybody walked back then. And so it's like the equivalent of Stadium Boulevard walking out to Emmaus. And so there's a lot of people on the road. And so these two guys are walking, talking about what's going on, and there's this other traveler there, and he just kind of saddles up next to him like, hey, what are you guys talking about? And they start telling him the story of what they had heard. And they're walking into the country, and then as they get a little bit closer to where they're supposed to go, they stop for a little snack, a little meal, and Jesus opens their eyes, and they realize that it's him. And so they rush back to tell the other disciples, but nobody believes him. there is an avalanche of evidence coming in. The eyewitness reports are coming in from all over the place, and they still don't believe it. There is so much doubt surrounding the resurrection, it is hard to miss. It's always made me feel a little bit more comfortable because I'm a skeptic and I'm a doubter. I think I always have been, and maybe always will be. Now, this last is final and seventh doubt is really important because Jesus just keeps showing up to different people at different times and different locations, not just to his chosen apostles, but to all kinds of people. And then he appears to his guys, his closest followers. He gives them the evidence that they had been longing for. He corroborates that eyewitness testimony. But there was one of them that wasn't there. One of the 12, Thomas, he wasn't with the others when Jesus came. And so Thomas is just like many of us. He's like, oh, man, I hear what you're saying, Peter. I see how amped up you are, John. But I don't have a framework for understanding that. And so I'm listening to you. I hear you. But I'm going to have to see it for myself. And Thomas goes into a weird area here. It's like, I got to put my finger in there. That's how much evidence I need. I don't want to just see. I got to put my hands on it. I got to put my fingers into those holes. I got to place my hand into the wound in his side. Now that is some serious doubt. I feel right at home with some of these things. Now what happens next is nothing short of miraculous. Because 8 days later, from that moment of hearing eyewitness testimony, the avalanche of evidence, to the doubt and the disbelief, Thomas just sat in that for 8 days. The disciples are gathered together again. Thomas is there. The doors are locked, but all of a sudden, just like before, Jesus is standing among them. I like how the gospel writers always include these little details, like we were just hanging out. The doors were locked. Nobody really knew where we were, and then Jesus just shows up. He doesn't slip in through the window. He doesn't knock on the door. He doesn't come down through the chimney. He just shows up. And when he does, it freaks us out every single time, which is why he says, guys, relax. It's that same kind of language. Jesus very famously once was taking a nap after being really exhausted. The storm rises up on the Sea of Galilee. His disciples freak out. Jesus, we're going to die. They're like, get up. And what does Jesus do? He gets up and he says, peace, be still. Man, I tell you what, sometimes, I don't want to get hyper spiritual here, but man, I'm telling you what, sometimes those doubts in my life, they feel like these raging torrents. And I forget who I need to be listening to. And then he says to Thomas, put your finger right here, man. Thomas, I heard you. I know it seems sometimes like I'm not listening and things don't go according to your timeline and your plan. This is so reassuring to me. I hear the compassion of Jesus stepping right up to Thomas. You know how close you got to be to somebody for them to put their hands on you? That's an arm's length. Here you go, Thomas. It's gross, but go ahead and put your finger in the hole, man. Jesus was stabbed in the side as he hung on the cross. They were trying to expedite his death. Come here, Thomas. Can you imagine standing in front of the resurrected Jesus and putting your hands, you know how close you would have to be, and then to hear Jesus say, oh man, I mean almost like a whisper, don't be faithless anymore. Believe. That's what Thomas needed. Man, that's what I need. Easter's for the doubters too. So I want to frame everything that we're going to talk about over the next 20, 25 minutes up under 3 challenges. And the first of these 3 challenges we've already seen. I want to challenge you to explore your doubts. I'm just taking this from the playbook of Jesus. He wanted Thomas to put a label on those doubts. I appreciate what Thomas did. He didn't just take things at face value. He didn't just hear what people said and say, well, I guess I just believe. He was like, no, there needs to be some kind of evidence here, fellas. I know we've been doing this for 3 years. They had followed Jesus for over 3 years. They saw all kinds of things. They had developed this kind of bond and this friendship that would have ultimately been as close as brothers. How much evidence do you need to not believe some of your closest friends and family members? And here's the issue. This is what I long to hear. This is what I needed to hear as a teenager. It's like, hey, Brad, those doubts that you got, it's okay, man. Let's push into it. Let's explore what those doubts are. Use this as fodder for your conversations with people in your life. A great conversation to have around the many tables that we're going to gather around with food, both today, throughout the week, and throughout your life. Have you ever asked somebody or even had the courage to say, you know what, when it comes to this faith and this stuff, we just got home from church, this pastor, he was getting all amped up about this idea of doubts. And I got doubts, and I don't know what to do with them. I had my kids sitting in the front row in the first service. I'm going to shout out to the mom and dads here for just a second. What would it look like for you to admit to your kids that you have doubts? It's going to open up a door for them to know it's okay to have doubts, that you don't have to run from them. I think I spent years and years just running from my doubts because I didn't feel like it was okay. Now, I was never a part of a church that said it's not okay to have doubts, but I just felt like it was. And I know that's how a lot of us feel. So to the kids in the room, listen, it's okay to have doubts. And it's okay to ask questions that are hard. And if your parents can't answer them, it's okay. Give them a break. We need the compassion of Jesus sometimes to hear the doubts and say, yep, I'm going to step into those with you. I want to challenge you to explore them. Put some labels on them. Why do you doubt? What are those doubts? And this is going to lead us right into our second of 3 challenges. And you're thinking, second of 3? We're almost done with the sermon, Brad? Yes. That's how fast we're going today, friends. I'm hungry. Come on, you know what I'm saying. That brings us to the second of 3 challenges. Because the moment you start to label and identify your doubts, you know what you're confronted with? Your beliefs. And let me just ask you straight up, why do you believe anything? I mean, think about that for a second. What do you need to see, hear, or have evidence of to believe anything? This is the second of 3 challenges. Why do you believe in anything? Before we can start talking about belief in a resurrection, first we got to explore our doubts. That's just going to bring us to the front door of what we do believe. Let me ask you, let me challenge you. Kids, great question to challenge your parents with. Hey, why do you believe that? Parents, we need to stop saying, because I said so. Man, I say that way too much. It's just weird. Kids need evidence. They need to know why. And the fact that they're asking why is critical. We need to stop turning away from it. We are subtly teaching our kids it's not okay to have questions and it's not okay to have doubts. Kids, listen, look at me. It's okay to have doubts. And if you're like me and you're just a grown-up kid, listen, it's okay to have doubts. And if you've heard a different message your whole life, okay, I get it. But that's not the message you're hearing today. This is a place where you can belong long before you believe. Because we're a community of doubters. Easter, man, it's for the doubters too. Now, I'm going to step into this for just a minute, so stay with me. There's been a lot of work, a lot of research that has been done by some of the most brilliant minds in human history in the substructures of belief. And so for the next 10 minutes, I'm just going to borrow from the world of psychology. I'm going to borrow from the world of social sciences, behavior analysis, and from the philosophers to help us understand the things that you believe, you actually have a framework for them. You maybe have not studied it or put labels on it, but others have. And so I'm gonna borrow some language from a guy that I ran into 15 years ago in my undergrad. Upper level undergrad was a class of worldview and ethics, and the guy who wrote the textbook for some of that material is this guy by the name of Dr. James Sire. And man, I tell you what, that guy was hard to read. You know those books you're like, why is this? It's taking me 6 years to read like 20 pages, you know? He's one of those guys. I'm going to borrow some of his lifetime of research, and he borrows from other brilliant minds. And what I want to do is I want to begin with a quote from a 17th century mathematician by the name of Blaise Pascal. He says this, that people almost invariably arrive at their beliefs not on the basis of proof, but on the basis of what they find attractive. And I want to use that to kind of just set us up to think about, why do I believe the things that I believe? Most of it maybe is just because I think that's the best, but I don't necessarily know why. And underneath that, we would see that there are ultimately 4 frameworks of belief, 4 major categories that all of our beliefs and the foundations of them ultimately rest. I'm going to put them all up here, and we're going to explore them very quickly. So bear with me. You could spend a lifetime just studying the research that's already been done. You could do your doctoral dissertation in any one of these categories. So in 10 minutes on a sermon on Easter Sunday, we're going to get a 30,000-foot perspective, okay? So stay with me. Many of us here today, we believe what we believe because of that first category, the theological category. And what does that mean? When we talk about the theological framework of belief, it's not very complicated. That whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam, whether it's the Hindus, whether it's Buddhism, whether it's Eastern mysticism, the underpinnings of theological beliefs ultimately come from some understanding of a divine revelation. Something has come to humanity. There are those who would believe that was alien life forms. And what they believe has a substructure based upon some kind of revelation. Whether you went up onto a mountain and got stone tablets, whether you went up onto a hill and got golden plates, whether you went into a private trance and received a divine revelation, you will find at the core of nearly every religious belief some kind of divine revelation. We would say ultimately God revealed himself through the person of Jesus. Why do I believe that? Because of a sacred text that I believe is inspired by God himself. Much of what I believe is based upon these simple frameworks. And many of you here today, you believe that we're celebrating the resurrection because of a divine revelation that comes through a sacred text, and mainly because you've heard people talk about it a lot. People on platforms. I grew up listening to guys standing in pulpits in front of altars in long robes. And as a small child, that was one of the primary authority figures that ultimately I rejected as a teenager, because I said, that and what you're saying is not a basis for what I believe. I was a little bit more like Thomas. Oh, you can talk all you want, but I need more than that. And just because you went to school and just because you have all these degrees and just because you're in a fancy robe, that don't mean nothing to me, bro. I've lived a lot of my life like that. I'm antagonistic and a skeptic. And there's many, now this doesn't apply necessarily as much to our Christian heritage, but there are many world religions that are based upon ancient traditions that have been handed down from generation to generation, even within inside of those of you who have a Catholic background, or of our friends who are visiting with us this morning from a Catholic background. Our friends at the Vatican and the Pope would say that their traditions are the same divine revelation as the sacred text. There's reasons why we believe what we believe. Many of us are here today because of our theological framework. Let me go to the next one. Many of us just believe what we believe because of our family of origin. Because that's what mom and dad said. That's what grandpa said. I just heard my dad say this. I'm not kidding. I'm going to tell you the silliest story. One of the silliest I've ever got. When I was a kid, we'd sit down at the dinner table. My dad didn't like to eat corn. So you know what my dad would say sarcastically? Corn has no nutritional value. You know what I grew up thinking? Corn has no nutritional value. Why? Because my dad said it. My dad was the smartest man I ever knew. Until I started dating a biologist. And I just offhandedly said one day, and she looked at me like, boy, we need to cut this date short. Apparently it has nutritional value. I didn't know. Why do we believe the things that we believe? Because people say it. This family of origin, think of that as the closest circle that surrounds you. Could be biological family, could be adopted family, could be the people you grew up with, could be grandma and grandpa. Much of what we believe just comes from other people. And we can expand that circle just a little bit. Many of us right now, we believe what we believe because our friends, the people that we spend the most amount of time with, or coworkers also believe it. And we have found ourselves, more so than ever in human history, in our independent echo chambers. We surround ourselves with people who think like us, talk like us, and believe like us, and therefore we just reinforce those ideas. Those become the underpinnings and structures and the frameworks of our beliefs, and we don't even know it's happening. You can expand that circle out just a little bit more into what is labeled by many as societal structures. Think about that with even inside of the community of Columbia that we are a part of. I'm going to use some labels that I don't appreciate. I don't think are often helpful, but it will get our point across. Columbia is labeled as a blue city. You know what I mean by that? But you go 5 minutes outside of Columbia, and what's the label we use for those other communities? Right, we use another color, and it's called red. You know what I'm talking about. We have become more divided over those political lines than really anything ever before. Those are societal structures that then reinforce a commonly held system of beliefs. And you go a little bit further out, maybe into the largest structure that you and I will be a part of, and that is the surrounding culture. Think of the American culture. There are many things that we hold very dear as Americans that are not held as close in other parts of the world, like freedom and independence and liberty. Man, we hold to those like they're inalienable rights. Any documents in our ancient past coming to mind? It's not like that across the world. You can spend 5 seconds in a foreign country and realize there are differences in the surrounding cultures. And as you get closer and closer into the families of origin, this has everything to do with why we believe what we believe. Now, this next one is so important. I'm going to borrow from a Nobel laureate. He says, for some of our most important beliefs, we have no evidence at all. For some of our most important beliefs, they don't come from evidence, except that the people we love and trust hold these beliefs. And considering how little we actually know, the confidence we have in our beliefs is preposterous. Oh, we've seen that like never before over the past couple years. And then I love how he concludes this. He says, but they're absolutely essential. What you believe matters. It shapes your reality. Have you ever thought, why do I believe anything at all? It's the second of 3 challenges. Now, let's jump into the psychological here for just a moment. This is one that you could read for the rest of your life and just begin scratching the surface of the research and studies that have been done. When we talk about the psychological factors that determine the underpinnings of our belief, ultimately what we're talking about is how we derive meaning and purpose in life. Many of you are here today because coming into a gathering, it provides some kind of purpose and meaning in your life. It grounds you in a kind of truth that you think has value. Have you ever thought of it through that lens before? For many of us, we feel like it's truth. We base so much of our life on that truth, and that becomes the basis for which we determine what's right and wrong. Think about that for just a second. How do you know what's right? This has everything to do with justice, which is a hot button word in our culture today. Who gets to determine what is right and wrong? And what we're seeing like never before is that basis for ultimate morality or truth is coming now down to the individual. What's your truth? You get to determine what's right and wrong. Well, that works pretty good until your right is my wrong. And then who gets to decide? My friends, that's the way we're going in our world today. And it has everything to do, this shouldn't surprise us. We should have the compassion of Jesus when people come with their doubts and skepticism, because we're all trying to figure out, how do I know it's true? Many of us, we saw this over the last 2 years like never before. We are driven to provide comfort. Don't you dare take our luxuries away. And ultimately safety. We have had and been a part of a global health crisis. Why do you think the stores ran out of toilet paper because we got scared. And one of the underlying frameworks for our belief is a drive to remain safe, and it manifested itself in something as laughable as toilet paper. But my friends, how many rolls you got in your house right now? You know what I'm saying? That's real. That hits home in an uncomfortable way. You know what I mean? And all of this helps us to see there's so much work done right here. How do you even know who you are? And how you would label your own identity and yourself. Like I would label myself, I've said it already like 3 times, as a doubter and a skeptic. Why? Because I don't fit into these frameworks that other people are constantly trying to force me into. It's always made me feel like kind of an outsider and an outcast. It's only in the hilarity of God that He would guide me to this place now. Only God would do that. Now, 4 frameworks of belief. We're just under the second of 3 challenges. The last one is philosophical. Think less guys in white beards with corncob pipes pontificating the universe. Think more fundamental truths of the universe that we have been exploring for as long as humanly possible. Think mathematics. Think physics. This should hit home for a lot of us. This is the language of Thomas. This is actually the language of the earliest followers of Jesus. They weren't basing their beliefs just because somebody said it. They weren't basing their entire life. They weren't willing to give their life because they didn't see Jesus. And I think this hits home for us. This is where a lot of us are today. We love to explore those fundamental truths that can be proven through a scientific method that we can test over and over and over and over and over again. And only when it has gone through the rigor of those tests do we say, that's true. I like that. That's one of the reasons why I'm a follower of Jesus to this day. I rejected long ago this idea that faith is blind. Has anybody ever heard that? That faith is just blind, you just got to take a leap of faith? It's just not true. There may be certain elements where God is calling you to step out on faith without knowing where He's calling you to. That's different than placing your belief in a resurrected Christ. Now, this idea of coherence, this is really important because a lot of us really kind of sit in this realm of it has to be logical. It has to make sense to us. If you've ever been confronted with an avalanche of evidence that didn't fit into one of these 4 frameworks, you're like, that's illogical. If you've ever had a conversation with a 5-year-old, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, honey, what you're saying doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? And it has to be consistent. I'm going to borrow this from one of the professors I had years and years ago, and he challenged me. It's like, your faith cannot be blind, and it cannot be deaf. It has to correspond to reality. Otherwise, it's not truth. God isn't asking you to check your brain at the door. He's asking you to use it, to label those doubts, to step into the reasons why you believe. That's the way of Jesus, not the other way around. It has to correspond to reality, and you and I, we are hungry for evidence just like Thomas. And if that's where you are today, my friends, you are in good company with a bunch of skeptics and doubters. And now what I want to do, after we sort of peel off of these 4 frameworks, I want to come back into some of the early writings of the early Jesus followers, specifically 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Listen to what the Apostle Paul says to one of these early groups of Christians he was helping to navigate their faith. He says this, "Why are some of you saying there's not going to be a resurrection of the dead? If there's no resurrection, then all of our preaching is useless, and your faith is useless, and all of us apostles are liars." Because we've been saying this whole time that God raised Jesus from the grave. But it can't be true if there's no resurrection. There's no resurrection. Christ hasn't been raised. And if Christ hasn't been raised, your faith is useless and you're still guilty of your sins. He's just talking about evidence. This is the philosophical framework of belief. How many of you are here today because somebody said something to you a long time ago and you just believed it? How many of you are here today just because you grew up with that? And then you had doubts and questions, and you didn't know what to do with it. So the first of 3 challenges was explore your doubts. The second of 3 challenges was to ask the question, why do I believe anything at all? These make great conversation starters. I'm not kidding. And here's the third one. We're almost to the end. Hang with me. Why do you believe or not believe in the resurrection? Because if everything hinges on the resurrection, if that's not true, we got up too early and we look too good for Sunday morning. You know what I'm saying? And hear me out. If you could pull the thread of the resurrection and somehow prove it wasn't true, the house of cards, that is our faith, comes tumbling to the ground. And here's the reality for many of us. We're here today because of what somebody else has said. We're here today because that's how we grew up. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with how you're raised. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with what you've heard. But I'm challenging you to answer this question. So, kids, ask your parents if they believe in the resurrection. And if they say yes, ask why. And if they say no, ask why. And here's what I want to do. So I want to close out our time together. I want to look at the 7 historical truths of the resurrection that we don't get from the Bible. That's a really important tagline. Because what you can find is, I'm telling you what, there has been so much. The New Testament specifically is the most scrutinized set of historical documents in the history of the world. There are more scholars and skeptics trying to blow holes in the New Testament than any other ancient document. Have you ever wondered why? And what I'll tell you what, I'll give you a clue into some of these guys. They are mind-numbingly brilliant. And we have a lot to learn from them. And one of my favorite is an atheist New Testament scholar. I know that sounds weird, but that's the thing. An atheist New Testament scholar, because there is such validity in the historical reality and reliability of the New Testament that you can have atheistic, non-believing New Testament scholars. So we're just going to borrow from all of them. And there's 12 universally agreed on truths about the resurrection that are accepted from the agnostics and the atheists and the historians. And I'm going to give you just 7 of them. 7 doubts, 7 truths. Number 1, undisputed claim from history. Jesus was a real person living in the first century. He was a Jew in the region of Palestine. Undisputed historical fact. Number 2, Jesus was crucified around 30 AD by a Roman governor by the name of Pontius Pilate. Undisputed historical fact. Number 3, soon after his burial, his tomb was found empty. Now, for the Jesus followers, you draw a conclusion. You say, because he came back from the dead, right? That's why we're here celebrating. Historians are like, nope. His disciples probably stole his body. Or he never actually died. He just passed out very convincingly. Even though he was beaten within an inch of his life and stabbed with a spear and drug and put in an empty tomb, somehow a couple days later, he moved that giant stone out of the way that was surrounded by guards. Why do you believe what you believe? That one doesn't hold a lot of water with me. Number 4, Jesus, his followers had experiences they believed were appearances of the resurrected Jesus. Now, this is important. This is technical language. A historian who is an atheist can easily say, oh yeah, it's a historical fact that his followers believed that they saw him, but he was dead. They just buried his body somewhere else. They switched the tombs. There's all kinds of theories. Why do you believe what you believe? And what do you believe about the resurrection and why? They believed they saw him. Now, this is gonna start to ramp up, so stay with me. The proclamation of the resurrection took place shortly after the crucifixion. This is critical when you're studying history because this gets us into the language of proofs. Anybody, any history majors in the room, you know what I'm talking about. And if you were to see a historical document emerge, let's say it was discovered in an ancient cave or an ancient tomb, it's unearthed, oh my gosh, we have an additional account and we date the writing of this to 100 years after the event. In the stage of human history, that's considered very reliable. A couple hundred years after, not so much. But to have historical attestation within just weeks and months, there's nothing like it. And I'm going to go off on a tangent here just for a second because I find this so fascinating. Do you know that shortly after the resurrection, there was an explosion of writing in human history? That may sound strange to you, but go back 2,000 years, there wasn't a lot of people who knew how to read and write, and to write something was very, very expensive to do. Why did so many people think it was so critical to write down these evidences, these eyewitness testimonies of what they saw to a degree we are still puzzled by? This explosion of manuscripts. Do you know why there's so much historical evidence for the resurrection? Is because today we have thousands and thousands of manuscripts that we have unlike anything else that's happened in history. Take your pick of any historical event and put it next to the manuscript evidence. It's going to be like this to this for the resurrection. It is mind-boggling. Why do you believe what you believe? Why do you believe or not believe in the resurrection? Now, number 6. The disciples' public testimony centered on their beliefs in Jesus' resurrection. So what the disciples say, oh, I saw Jesus. And then they turned around and said, hey, I saw Jesus. That's the centerpiece of the entire New Testament. He came back, guys. It's real. And everything that he said was real. And if we follow him, it can be real for us. That's the entirety of the New Testament. It's beautiful. It's unlike anything in the world. My friends, what you and I are standing on today is much firmer than maybe what you have ever thought possible. And number 7, this is probably my favorite. Saul of Tarsus, as he's known in historical communities, we would call him the Apostle Paul, same name, same guy. He was so prolific. And people were so convinced that what he was writing to them was the words of God, they made copy after copy after copy. You know what? I've got copies. Right here. I read you a letter written from Saul of Tarsus to a group of Christians living in Corinth 2,000 years ago. It's a historical document that people have been trying to blow holes in for thousands of years, and yet it has stood the test of time. Have you ever wondered why? Have you ever wondered, why do you preach and teach from the Scriptures? Why do you think that's the right holy book? Well, I've got an avalanche of evidence. Because I'm not just going to believe something because somebody said it. And I love my parents, and they did an amazing job at helping to shape and mold my understanding and my frameworks of belief. But at some point, I turned my back on that. I needed more, just like Thomas, and maybe just like you. They see Saul of Tarsus, and they're going, okay, so this guy was an anti-Jesus sort of guy, and he spent a lot of his time trying to get rid of Christians until he claims to have met Jesus. And we don't understand it. He thinks he saw him. He was probably hallucinating, but he spends the rest of his life telling as many people as possible, even though everybody tried to kill him because he just wanted to tell people that God loved them. That doesn't make sense. That's illogical. That isn't coherent. But it is coherent to think a guy ran into the resurrected Jesus and said, oh, dude, I'm totally sorry. I'm going to go tell as many people as I can. I'll see you later, right? That's exactly what happens. How do you explain it? I'm going to bring in another brilliant mind, Dr. Ralph Lewis. He says, we give our subjective experience too much credence, and so to our beliefs. We'll more readily explain away evidence that contradicts our cherished beliefs by expanding and elaborating that belief with additional layers of distorted explanation rather than abandoning it or fundamentally restructuring. All he said was this: you have your 4 frameworks of belief. Even up against an avalanche of evidence that's contradictory to what you believe, you're more likely to rework what you already have than accept the avalanche of belief. My brothers and sisters, today, it's time that we open our eyes and our ears to the evidence. And I know as I say that, many of you are thinking, wow, the scientific community is trying to dismantle Christianity. No, they're not. They're supporting it. God is not an anti-science God. We're just exploring his beautiful universe and having our minds constantly blown at the architecture of a creator, and it's leaving scientists, scholars, and skeptics dumbfounded at its grandeur and its intricacy. Who's closing their eyes to the evidence? It shouldn't be us. I'm challenging you guys to open your eyes and your ears and your hands to the avalanche of evidence. If there's a new discovery, welcome it. If we see something out in space, open your heart to it. God is real. The third of 3 challenges: why do you believe or not believe in the resurrection? I want to come back into John chapter 20. Jesus, out of his compassion, he meets us right where we are. Thomas was in a different place than all the other disciples. He needed a different kind of evidence. Don't discredit what God might do in your heart today. I love how Thomas responds. May we all be so bold. My Lord and my God. He had his evidence. It was standing right in front of him. I imagine Thomas falling down on his knees and his Savior wrapping in his arms and saying, you know what, Thomas, you believe because you've seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me. My friends, receive this blessing today. In your belief that is filled with doubt and skepticism, receive the blessing of your Creator, the one who knit you in your mother's womb, the one who laid out the fabric of the stars, the lover of your souls says, come here, I'll give you some evidence. And the disciples, they saw Jesus do so many other things in addition to the ones recorded in this book. I love, this is John's heart, but I'm writing, I got to tell you all these things so that you can believe, that you can continue to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, because when you believe in him, you're going to experience a kind of life that you've never, ever dreamed possible. That's what we're celebrating here today. Welcome to Easter at Forum, my friends. 3 challenges. Easter's for the doubters. So to those of you who would claim to be followers of Jesus this morning, when the dust settles after your doubts, as you explore them, as you challenge your own frameworks of belief, my hope and my prayer is that you'd realize that you are standing on the most firm foundation the world will ever know, and it's the truth of Jesus. And to those of you who, for whatever reason, probably a lot of them, are on the fence about faith in Jesus, you belong here with us, because we're all a bunch of doubters and skeptics trying to navigate our way of faith. You can belong here long before you ever believe. I would challenge you, what are you going to do with the avalanche of evidence? Let's spend just the next minute or so gathered, bowing our heads now in prayer. Our Father in heaven, we are feeling the weight of our unworthiness. And by your Spirit and by your word, may you breathe new life into our hearts that are often riddled with doubt. We don't want to just believe to believe. We don't want to just believe because people say things. We want to be open to an avalanche of evidence that is the truth in God. May your truth wash over us in brand new ways today. May it ignite a brand new passion inside of us for the truth of your Son, Jesus, and may it lift up our voices in a brand new way today, because we will no longer be faithless. We want to be like Thomas. Would you give us the gift of belief? Ignite in us, God, a passion for what you care about. Give us your eyes and and your ears and your hands that we may receive the avalanche of truth that stands right in front of us. May you accept now our prayers, our offerings, our gifts, our songs as a small reflection of our love for all that you have done, are doing, and ultimately will do. It's too good. You're too good to us. We love you. We thank you. We praise you. On this blessed Resurrection Sunday, we pray it all in the name, the most beautiful name the earth has ever known, the name of Jesus. Amen.
Let's stand and sing as we continue to celebrate the love that God has for us. From the darkness, I called your name. Into darkness, your mercy came. You called me out, you lifted me up. How great is your love? You bore my weakness, you took my shame, buried my burdens in fields of grace. You called me out, lifted me up. How great is your love? From the heights of heaven, you stepped down to earth. Innocent perfection, gave your life for us, and we are amazed. Yes, we stand in awe, for we have been changed by the power of the cross. How great, how great is your love? How great, how great, how great is your love? How great, how great, how great is your love for us? In your kindness, you lead me home. In your presence, where I belong. Oh, you called me out, lifted me up. How great is your love? From the heights of heaven, you stepped down to earth. Innocent perfection, you gave your life for us, and we are amazed. Yes, we stand in awe, for we have been changed by the power of the cross. How great, how great, how great is your love? How great, how great, how great is your love? How great, how great, how great is your love for There has never been, and there will never be a God like you, a love so true. And there has never been, and there will never be a God like you, a love so true. There has never been, and there will never be a God like you, a love so true. There has never been, there will never be.
Love is so great. Right now we get to share in this beautiful moment of communion together. You guys can go and have a seat. As we partake of the Lord's Supper and communion together, you know, we're reminded of the reality that the greatest example of love that this world has ever known, we get to hold in our hands that which represents that magnificent love for us. And we take the bread and we take the juice and we remember that the God of the universe loves us that much that he chose to come to this earth and to die for you and for me so that we could simply be with him for eternity. If you don't hear anything else this morning, hear this, that God loves you and he died for you. And so let's just sit in that posture and that heart of thankfulness in this moment as we commune together. And on a practical note, if you haven't ever used these communion cups before, there's two flaps, and the top one exposes the bread, then you lift the next one and exposes the juice. So let's have communion together for these next few minutes right now.
Church, would you stand with us as we continue to celebrate and sing of all that Christ has accomplished? I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. I was breathing but not alive, and all my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb till I met you. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. And then you called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness. Sing it out. Into your glorious day. Mercy has saved our souls. Let's sing it. Now your mercy has saved my soul. Now your freedom is all that I know. The old made new, Jesus, when I met you, and then you called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran God sent a Savior for us so that we could be redeemed. Let's sing this together. I needed rescue, my sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, now you call me a citizen of heaven. Let's sing this together. I needed rescue, my sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, now you call me a citizen of. When I was broken, you were my healing, now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you call my name, sing it, church. I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. Then you called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. Amen. Let's praise him for all he has done, all he is, and all he will continue to do. Amen. Church, may we continue to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, not just today on Easter, but for the rest of our lives. You know, if you're new or visiting here at Forum, welcome to the Forum family. We're so glad that you're here. And if you wouldn't mind, we'd love to get to know you. Stop by the starting point. It's that circular desk in the lobby. We'd love to have a conversation with you and answer any questions you might have and just hear more about your story. We do have an event coming up for you on April 26th. It's the Tuesday night at 6 p.m. here at Forum. It's our Connect event. And it's a great event for you to come if you're just looking to have some questions answered and learn more about what Forum is. You can either sign up online at myforum.me or you can sign up at the starting point. Church, we are currently living in the power of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Amen? Amen. Let's have that on our hearts as we leave this place. Have a great week. Happy Easter, and we'll see you soon.